Once you give your life to Christ and God creates the mystery of the miracle of regenerating your heart from a heart of stone to a heart of flesh, that it can't be reversed.
It's like just because you've been given grace doesn't mean you can just crash into things and not expect consequences.
I pull up to the house and I say, hey, when you leave this car for the next 30 days, I don't want to text, I don't want to talk, I don't want to call. You need to spend time with God, and I need to spend time with God, whether this relationship is right for us. We cared more about our theology than we cared about people.
Hey, it's Rich, and you're listening to the Mature Me podcast, weekly content devoted to all things life, leadership, culture, and faith. Thank you for taking some time to tune in. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on all our social channels so you don't miss a thing. Let's listen to today's episode.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Mature Me podcast. My name is Rich Wilkerson Jr., and we're so grateful that you are tuning in today. As always, we just make a simple request. Leave a comment, like this content, share it with people, and of course, subscribe to the channel. It is so much fun to watch the progress of this community grow, to see so many people from really all over the world tune in and grow with us, because honestly, that's what Mature Me is about. It's not about just growing old. It's about growing up, becoming the person that God's called you to become. And so many resources here to help you do that. One of my favorites is every Tuesday morning, we put out a free leadership email, richwilkersonjr.com. It's called Leadership with Rich. Just gives you some leadership handles so that you can grow daily in your leadership. Also, we've got great events taking place in our community, Pastors Assembly, right there at the end of January. If you're a pastor or a leader, we got a golf tournament this year. And then of course, we've got Monday and Tuesday. What's the dates of that, Allie? January 27 and 28. You want to be a part of that. And then our biggest thing, I know we're still kind of far out, VooCon 2026, Pastor Stephen Furtick, Elevation Rhythm, so many other people. I just mention these things because I think that often you can get content, but you got to get content and community. That's really where the growth is going to take place. So check those events out, be a part of it. With no further ado, I'm so excited for today's guest. This is a friend of mine. We go back almost 15 years, if I am correct.
Yeah.
But he pastors an amazing church in Rancho Cucamonga, California. It's called Patria Church. He's the husband of one woman. He has two little kids.
Yep, two boys.
And he's leading an amazing, amazing community. We're going to talk all about it. But this is my friend, Adam Mesa, ladies and gentlemen. How are you, Pastor Adam?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to be here.
I like when you're in Miami.
Listen, I love Miami. And you know, you've told me before, because when we've seen each other, I'm like, man, I'm in Miami pretty often. And you're like, I'm slightly offended you never text me. And I'm like, I'm not going to bother you, you know, like you're doing. So this time I bothered you.
No, I want you to like, move in with me.
Yeah. Give me
we just became best friends. Should we get an apartment together?
Yeah, give me an ADU in the back. That mother-in-law's suite. I'll bring my two boys, me and Ashley. Ashley wants to move here so bad.
Your wife's amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
We're going to talk all about her career and who she is, but
yeah, I
feel like you guys fit Miami.
Hey, I would listen, if for one day it don't work out for whatever reason, the Lord calls. I think we're doing good in California, but if for some reason,
I feel like these days every preacher's got to have a backup plan.
Yeah. You're currently my backup plan.
No, I'm going to
put you on my vision board.
Could you use a youth pastor?
Yeah.
Midlife, but
I need a good young adults guy. I'm coming. So if you're ready,
I'll come and
bring that rendezvous back.
We met how many years ago?
Oh man, we
15?
met probably about 13 years ago. Introduction by Jabin Chavez.
Yeah, tell that story. I think it's a good story because I came out for like a youth conference.
Yeah, you came out for the youth conference that I used to do, which we had somewhat in our region become known for. It was called the Milk and Honey Conference, the land of milk and honey. We were going to take the youth students to the land of milk and honey. That's how you know you got the Bible. That's how you know I'm straight out of Bible college at that point.
Bro, the fact that you named it the Milk and Honey Conference is strong.
Yeah. And I remember you definitely probably had been doing merch at that one point, but back then we had a whole merch line, and one of it was like a bear reaching into a beehive, pulling out honey, and it said Milk and Honey Conference and stuff like that. And you were like, "Oh, that's really cool stuff," like you had. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, Rich thought my stuff was cool," like it really wasn't cool for back then, but so did a conference. You were our first speaker ever because Jabin Chavez said, I know exactly the guy you got to have. He has a young adult ministry called Rendezvous. And immediately at that point, because I mean, he had told me that probably 6 months to 9 months before we even did the conference. So that would have been about 2012. So that's right when I started like keeping up with Rendezvous, and kind of Instagram was only like a year old. And so your guys' stuff was posted on Instagram and all that stuff like that. And you'd find stuff on Facebook and everything like that. And it really, I actually knew of you before when you used to be on Juice TV when you was interviewing. So, I'm a church kid, and, my dad got saved by watching TBN. And so I knew TBN for a long time. And so I'm like, oh, Rich is the guy that interviews on TBN's funny. Juice TV.
I know, I'm just older now doing the exact same thing.
You've been interviewing for over 25 years.
Smaller budget.
Yeah, you don't
reaching more people.
You don't have the big studio,
I think it's really cool. Today I want to talk about a couple of things.
Yeah.
I definitely want to talk about transition, because I was just at your church, and of course I got to go there 13 some years ago. The church that your dad started 30 plus years ago, I want to hear a little bit about that story. But I mean, it's had a massive impact. I mean, I walked around the facilities and the campuses, and you guys have got a private school. You guys have got hundreds of employees. You reach tens of thousands of people in this area, really, really transforming a city. But you're sort of new at the helm, leading that. I want to talk through maybe how the church began, even sort of your journey of coming to where you're at today. Because there's some funny bumps along the road that I think we can talk about. But ultimately, I want to talk at some point about just transition, how we do that well, and what you're learning from. So can you maybe just tell us a little bit about the history of Patria Church, the church that you're leading now?
My dad started it in 1994. And so he started it in our living room of our bed of his house. It was like 1,000 square foot house in a city called Fontana, which is next to Rancho Cucamonga. Our county that we're in is called San Bernardino County. So across America, it has the highest welfare. The San Bernardino city itself has the highest welfare per capita than any other place in America. So he also was he invests majority of the finances into children's and youth ministry, into the next generation. And he's always done that. And so that journey started growing. It started growing very rapidly because in the 90s and 2000s, just a lot was going on in Los Angeles, specifically in the minority churches. And my dad was just a really consistent family pastor. Our church was Abundant Living Family Church. So it was like a big emphasis in what we focused on. And so families were being healed, delivered, restored. A lot of single mothers is what our outreach is. So today, we're much more like a bag of Skittles. You were recently there. You can't really tell one ethnicity, but we are minority. You can tell everyone in the room is a minority, whether that's African American, Hispanic, Asian, Indian, all that kind of stuff like that. Our minority in our church is white. And so even still to this day, with me being the pastor, it's gotten, especially post-COVID, it's gotten really diverse because my style is just a little bit different than my dad's, and my discipleship method is a little bit different than my dad's. And so it's kind of, the demographic coming out of COVID changed for our church. But ultimately, up until about 2 years before COVID, it was in 2017. Well, the main part was I grew up in church. And so I grew up around, my dad was a Word of Faith guy. So he went to Rhema and all that kind of stuff like that. And then in 2008, he gets diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer, bone marrow cancer, like 90% chance that he's going to die within a year. He's still alive today, Praise God. 17, 18 years later. But at that same time, I get saved in 2007. My brother, almost like the underground church, because like, one of the things that kept me from faith was I would see kind of never from my dad, but from other believers and even people I knew in my church, like the abuse of kind of the charismatic Pentecostal gifts, I would see prophecies not true. I would see healings not happen. I would hear things like, if you don't speak in tongues, like you're not saved and stuff like that. And I thought that was every Christian. And then one day my brother was like, that not everyone believes in those type of things, which started my journey in kind of the young, restless, reformed era, which kind of started in 2006 and just grew rapidly within the Christian church. So
hold on, let's talk about that for a minute. So your dad starts this church, Abundant
Living Family Church.
I went there.
Yeah.
It climbs up to how many people were showing up there?
Oh my goodness. Back then?
Yeah.
Oh man. Back then still 10,000,
Jeez.
Yeah.
So
he had, as a Mexican, he had had one of the largest churches in America as a Mexican American in America, period.
He was saved watching TBN.
Yeah.
Went to Rhema Bible College,
Yeah.
which some people are watching this, they don't know what those things are, but it's Kenneth Hagin's school. It's
Yeah.
Word of Faith.
Yeah.
He really, really goes to church in a minority, a black church, learns a lot of that cadence flow style of preaching, goes out to Rancho Cucamonga out of his house. This thing begins to grow, flourish. You're raised in this. His emphasis, maybe where it shifts, is he's got a gift to preach, but he's also going to go, we're going to invest into families, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're going to make sure that all the generations are represented here. This is a safe place. We're going to develop you, mature you, disciple you. This thing explodes. 10,000 people. Young Adam, one of three boys.
Yeah. The youngest.
You're the youngest.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in this massive world for being a boy. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Your dad, this church is growing.
Yeah.
But you're telling me because of maybe some of the people that came through or some of the things that you guys were around, there were some things that you would hear be said, but then maybe not lived up to. It didn't all the way match. With this takes you down a path of, look, tell me this path, because I think this is very, very fascinating. And maybe we're in some niche stuff right here, but it's very interesting to me because okay, we have to try to explain it to the audience a little bit because some people might not know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So you're like dad. Essentially, you're rebelling against your dad, but you're rebelling. You're going from one stream of Christianity doctrinally to another.
What? Yeah, we're literally with
so
the
funny
pendulum switches, right?
Okay.
So we go from
This is called Christian rebellion.
yeah, exactly. And so, you know, in high school when I wasn't saved, I was wild and reckless, and then I had a little bit of wild, you know, when I went into college. So those were 2 seasons where, you know, I just went into full hedonism type of thing, you know.
Yep.
But at this time, I get saved. My middle brother Caleb leads me to Christ in our bedroom. Well, in his bedroom. And once he starts discipling me, he had already gotten turned on to the Reform movement. And for us in our movement, it wasn't Mark Driscoll, it was first John MacArthur,
yes,
and then it was John Piper. So he hands me a CD series on 1 Corinthians 13 by John MacArthur. It was like 8 CDs on just that one chapter. And I would, in my closet with a CD player, like be listening to it, scared. I knew it was contrary to what my dad believed. And so I was like afraid, and we like hide it and all that stuff. And I just I listened to that probably over, 50 times in the first 6 months of becoming a Christian, because, you know, maybe you remember back then, maybe you were from this stream or you weren't, but back then, especially in the charismatic church, if you had a question about God and the Bible, it means you didn't have faith.
Sure. So
you could never ask questions. So even if I wanted to ask my dad or one of his friends or something, why tongues or what, it would have been like, you just haven't experienced it. Like, but yeah, we're in the Bible. Where does that? And it would be like, well, you just don't have faith. That's your problem. And it's like, can I get an answer? You know? And so that's what led me to get frustrated, because it had seemed like in the Reformed church, everything was black and white. In the Calvinistic church, everything had an answer for everything, you know?
And that brought you comfort.
And that brought me comfort because now I had answers. And at the same time, I'm in high school and I have a 1.4 GPA. I'm only one of 2 students not going to graduate. It was the local drug dealer and then me. And so I'm struggling in school. And for the first time ever, I feel like I understand something, you know? I'm completely embarrassed that I'm not about to walk at graduation. I'm enrolling in adult night school with all immigrants into the United States who no one speaks English. And then there's me at 17 years old who's not going to finish high school, and I have to go and get a GED. You know, like I'm having those conversations, and then I'm also getting radically saved and reading the Bible and listening to sermons and finally understanding them, not just God as an experiential God, but God as one who has answers to life, you know? And so then that births an extreme version of Christianity for me. And my dad having cancer, there was a specific time, me and my brother Caleb, my older brother Nathan, he was working on his master's degree. We had girlfriends, and we were at lunch one day, and my dad said, your girlfriends are saved, right? We said, oh yeah. And he said, are they filled with the Holy Spirit? And we said, oh, I don't know. What do you mean? You know, they're saved. So yes, they're filled with the Holy Spirit. You know, we knew what he was saying, but
yeah.
And he had cancer. He had just got diagnosed. And so, he said, they speak in tongues, right? We said, no. And he said, well, how are you going to be with someone if you guys speak in tongues and they don't? And I was like, now fast forward, my dad's completely different. His theology has changed a lot as well. But at the time we said, well, we don't speak in tongues either. And he was shocked because my brother Caleb was going to seminary. He was going to be going to seminary. And then I was in Bible school I was going to be going to Bible school. I was in the summer break. And he said, wait, and we start telling him about Calvinism. He had never heard of it. He had never even heard of Reformed theology. So we start explaining it to him, and he's distraught. And he goes, so you're telling me, wait, I have cancer. Are you telling me God will only heal me if he wills, and it's in, his greater sovereign plan? Like, I can't pray, I can't fast, I can't seek the Lord. And we were like, no. And now you fast back, like, what jerks were we? Stage 4 cancer, tell your dad God can't heal you, but we cared more about our theology than we cared about people. And that became, a stakehold for us for 4 or 5 years, My dad starts freaking out. So he tells me, you can only go to one college. I talked to a friend. It's a Pentecostal school called Life Pacific University. And it's a Foursquare Bible college. Started by Amy Semple McPherson, who, mind you, I'm young, restless, reformed. At that time, I don't even believe women could even sneeze in the church at this time. And for 2 years, I'm at Life Pacific University just causing hell in that university. All of my papers are on Calvinism. All of my professors I'm giving headaches to. I remember Jim Adams, who's still there to this day, and we laugh about it to this day. He took me to coffee, and he was like, Adam, you might want to look to go to school somewhere else. You're not embracing anything here. All your papers are opposite to what we teach. There's a spiritual gifts class. I used to call it the School of Dark Arts, like from Harry Potter, and it stuck with a bunch of students. I just did not,
Oh my gosh.
I was that guy. And, you and I were talking the other day, and you're like, I don't see that in you. And I'm like, well, the Lord has matured me a lot, but essentially then my brother starts at Master's Seminary, which is John MacArthur Seminary.
Yeah.
Me and my brother get time with John MacArthur. He knew of my dad. John was not a fan of my dad because obviously different theologies. John MacArthur, is extreme right, conservative theology in the sense of Calvinism, and, women can't preach and the gifts have ceased and all that kind of stuff like that. And he essentially, I transfer out, I go to the college, and my brother goes to the seminary. He gets his MDiv. I study theology and apologetics. I thought intellect was the answer to everything. I thought making sure people didn't know you were dumb was, the greatest thing you could do in life is have an answer for everything and be able to tell people to shove it, with your intellect. And we embraced that for 3 years. My brother went for 4 years. And through a course of a lot of stuff that happened, God started convicting me, a lot about where we were at the time. And just a lot of lack of love. I mean, you look at Book of Revelation, and John says in one of the letters, this city, you have everything, but you have no love. I mean, that's not everyone, but we experienced that a lot when we were there. It lacked compassion towards people. And there were key moments of things that happened while I was at school that just showed me that, we could have answered everything, but man, there's no love here. And there's no compassion for people. And so at the end of school, I ended up going back. I could go more into that if you want, but I ended up going back to my dad's church after three and a half or 4 years. And I told my dad, hey, we don't agree in the same theology, but because for those years we didn't speak. We had a rule not to talk about theology because we'd always end in an argument. And for a family that only loves church and ministry, there's nothing to talk about when you agree not to talk about ministry. And so we really didn't talk for those 3. And my dad would say, happy birthday, love you, son, all that stuff. He always extended care and an olive branch. But I went and met with my dad and said, hey, one thing I know is you love Jesus and you want to see people saved. And even I had talked about it with John MacArthur, and John had said, you should go back to your dad's church. So I got the blessing of my pastor and all that stuff. Years later, his mind had changed and he told me I should leave, but that was after Strange Fire and stuff like that. But at the time I got his blessing and went back to my dad's church. And then Jabin Chavez became a pivotal voice in my life because Jabin was like, hey, let's talk theology. I want to learn more. You're educated in that. And I'll show you about what the Holy Spirit can do. And I had an open mind, and I said, hey, I had hit rock bottom at the time with a lot of stuff. I had no one, I had no community, no nothing. And I was out at clubs and fraternity parties and all stupid stuff. So I'd really just like, man, I got nothing else left. Like, so when I, repented, and it was my dad who I told everything that I was doing my last year of college. Right shortly after that, I had met Jabin, and he started exposing me to things that God does through the power of the Holy Spirit. And I had no rational, logical answer for the things that were happening. David Hall was a part of that. And I remember I had taken my youth students to a youth camp, and on my way up, because Jabin had told me David does an invitation to, be filled with the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues. And so I brought 8 youth students. We went up to Micah Bertot's church in Modesto for a youth conference. And I asked my students, do you guys know what speaking in tongues is? And they said no. And I said, if I asked you to do it, what would that look like? None of them had an answer. By the end of the night, all of them were speaking in tongues. I went in with skepticism, and David didn't even do it on stage. And I look and I'm like, oh man, what is happening? And so God just took me through a whole journey,
I think it's really cool. I think the journeys are so interesting and fascinating to me. And but I think on all of the ends too, like where you're at today and how you're leading, and maybe we'll find out today where you land theologically. I'm the biggest mutt of them all, by the way. For sure. I have no clarity here. I am Calvinist and I am Arminian. For sure. I've listened to more John MacArthur sermons than you could ever imagine. Yeah. And man, there's been some moments under John Piper's ministry personally for me that have just wrecked me, and their writings, and also rest in peace to John MacArthur, who we lost this past year. But I also just think the maturity of your father, that's got to be a different thing or a different feeling. Don True and I were somewhere recently. We were in Dallas, and we ran into a friend who's a minister, and we were with another minister. So we were at breakfast with a minister. And then we ran into another minister, and this other minister said to this minister, "Hey, I want to let you know my son's been going to your church on Sunday." And this person just said, "I'm so happy that they're over there with you guys." And Don and I talked about it because we have little kids, Of course I want my kids to be in my ministry, and I would love for my kids I want to build a church that they want to be a part of. But you know what I really want? I want my kids to know Jesus. I want my kids to be faithful to the gospel. And I think it says a whole lot about your dad that, he didn't disown you. He didn't cut you off, but rather even as you guys were figuring it out, and everyone has to do that. Yeah. These things that we're talking about, I also want to be really, really careful because, these are frameworks for theology of helping people to create systems to understand and to know God. The whole point here is to know God. It's not about knowing about God. It's about knowing God. And the scriptures require good hermeneutics and good interpretation. And I'm grateful for teachers and men who've gone before us, who have labored and toiled over creating ways for us to interpret these things and make sense out of these as we cross-reference it. And it's a great tool. And so I would never want to, even from this platform, ever give a hint towards certain movements that are wrong or not right. It's everything's nuanced. And, just because you encounter somebody at my church who was arrogant doesn't mean that, the community at large is arrogant, or just because you encounter someone here who preached something, I don't believe that just because he said that. And so I think as we wade through those waters, whether that's the Word of Faith movement, or if that's Reformed, or if that's these spaces, we all have our experience with it. But I just find it to be really, really fascinating. Like all of these streams that you grew up in that brings a person to where they are at today. It's like people don't get it. It's like, bro, we've gone through the blender of things. And in your own wrestle, that's what it is. Like you're wrestling, like Jacob. It's like I'm wrestling with God. Like, what is it that I believe? And I'm at 41 years of age, and I'm I'm still in the wrestle. I think actually that's where he wants us.
Yeah.
Is to be wrestling with these questions. And
Yeah.
I don't have all my questions answered. And I like what you said. Like, I don't want to build a world or a space that you can't ask questions.
Yeah.
I want to be able to say to my kids or to our church, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, let's continue to pray. Like, let's keep bringing our questions to God. Let's keep studying the scriptures, and let's keep wrestling with things, because he will bring about clarity. Clarity will bring about confidence.
Yeah.
And I think that where you're at today, it's so cool to watch your leadership grow. As you're coming back and you meet Jabin and whatnot, you start to go, all right, maybe I kind of, threw the baby out with the bathwater a little bit in certain things. It's like, talk maybe about some of the things that you started to discover and started to learn.
Well, what started happening is like you said, it's like, it's easy to demonize what you came out of, or even look on the other side and be like, hey, they're wrong, this is wrong, therefore I want no relationship to do with it and stuff like that. And I was a product of that back in the day. For me, it was like me and my camp only. If you weren't rocking with John MacArthur, I'm not rocking with you, and so therefore back then it was like, even in the Reformed movement, whether it was Driscoll or anything, it was like people would hear, oh, you're Reformed, you're Calvinist, do you love Driscoll? It's like, no, I don't like those guys, because MacArthur doesn't like those guys. And so I was that individual. And also MacArthur was very great. Like, when you would meet with him one-on-one, he was so caring, so gracious. Like, his platform shepherd sermon is and very different from his, private. Even when I tell people I had his blessing to leave and go back to my dad's charismatic church, most people who know the platform of MacArthur were like, man, I can't believe that. It's like, he's actually was very caring and compassionate. It's just the environment kind of birthed things that you just may not be a fan of, and what happened was as I came back, there was a pivotal moment in class when I was at Masters that I had a professor who he asked me for extra credit to do an assignment on my dad's church. And I explained to him that I don't go to my dad's church anymore. And he said, I know, Adam, but all the kids in this class go to the same 3 Baptist churches in the local area, including Grace. It would be fun for me, good change of pace, if you could do, and the assignment was, what does your church do for the community outside of the 4 walls of the church?
Cool.
And that was the paper. It was historical theology, and it was the gospel. Part of the assignment, or what we were learning, was the gospel always spreads the moment the church gets out of the 4 walls. And so that was the assignment. Go to your church, study your church, and ask them, what do you do outside of Sunday for the community, for the gospel? And so I did my dad's church, and there was over 60 things that they did Monday through Friday, whether it be from, helping prostitute single mothers with their children, having a taxi outside for prisoners and an RV for a shower, all that. It was all this stuff, right? Drug rehab, single mother stuff, all that stuff. And so I did this paper. My professor had me go last on purpose. I come to find out later on he did it on purpose. And there was like 18 students in the class, and so it was over 2 days. And I was the last one to go, gave my paper. Every other kid said that their church does a Thanksgiving like turkey drive. That's what they do all year. And then I went up and I said, oh, well, I was asked to do my dad's church. This is what they do Monday through Friday, 365 days out of the year, or whatever that comes out to. My professor at the end of my paper, he looks at the class and he said, his dad would never be welcome to speak at chapel, ever. They would never let his dad speak at a chapel. And he said, but his dad does more in one day than all your churches combined do in an entire year for people outside of the 4 walls of the church. And then he looks at the class, and then he looks at me. He said, in front of the whole class, he said, Adam, my prayer for you. He was like 75 years old. His name was Dr. Owen. He wore a cowboy hat to class, small, kind of like Hispanic white guy. He says, Adam, my prayer for you is that when you get my age, that more than you know about Jesus, you look like Jesus. And then he looked at the class. He said, because everyone here, you all know a lot about him, but none of you look like him. And then he said, class dismissed. Man, I started like tears, It triggered in me, like, and then he said, and then the class was leaving. He looked at me and he said, Adam, your dad looks like Jesus. Don't ever forget that. He looks like Jesus. And I was like, man. I said, you think I should be at my dad's church, huh? He said, I'm not going to tell you what to think. That's the whole point. Go ask God. And just that afternoon, I skipped the rest of my classes, drove home, and
Wow.
said, Dad, hey, I don't know what it would look like. I still don't believe women can preach. I don't believe God can heal like that. I don't believe in tongues. I'm Calvinist. I believe God has elected a church and altar calls aren't necessary. And I just name everything I don't agree with at the time, which I flipped on all those things now over the years. So that moment happened. So within 6 months, I'm meeting Jabin and tell Jabin my whole story. And Jabin's like, man, it was the first kind of charismatic guy that I had met that like didn't reject me. Was like, oh man, that's beautiful. I love that you love the Bible. That's amazing. What, you know, like, let's talk. Are you open to the Holy Spirit doing more? And yeah, I think so. Because I had already been open to, God had already been opening my eyes in so many other areas. And so when that happens, some of the conversations and some of the things that I was processing was, I just understood that, we all have an interpretation, and, for those that, may not geek out over this stuff, but we all have a hermeneutic to approaching the Bible.
Yep.
And so, I started realizing, even in the camp that I was in, we were coming in with some sort of bias. We were coming in with some sort of extra biblical commentaries to inform our interpretation of those particular passages, which ultimately they're the minors, they're not the majors, right? It's not salvation. We all agree on what salvation is. We all agree how we're saved by faith only. We all know the gospel. So all of us agreed on all those things. It became the minors, the ecclesiological stuff. What does Sunday look like? What does evangelism look like? That's where we started disagreeing with one another. And so when I looked at it, I was like, you know what? Actually, if I'm honest, we're using extra biblical commentaries and theologians through church history to make this point, while the charismatic person and the more Pentecostal, they're doing the same thing. And so let me be open, and then also let me find in Scripture where I can, do those things. And so I think it was a great blessing that I was trained at Masters, because I had a hermeneutical, like I knew how to divide Scripture. That's the whole thing that you do. So then now coming into this space and seeing God move, it was, now let me see if I can find it in Scripture. Let me see if I can see it in theology.
Preach expository now still, right?
I would do what's called expository topical preaching. So I don't go by the book, but I go by clusters of Scripture now. So my dad was completely topical. Yep. And then I came in, and now that I'm pastoring,
But even if you're on a topic, your tradition would typically be to take a text and exegete it line by line for the most part?
For the most part. The way I would be doing it.
I do that sometimes, but that's not what I do
I take a topic, and then I take a cluster of Scriptures, so a paragraph or whatever, and I'll exposit that. We'll either continue it, or we will, or we'll move on to it like a new cluster. But yeah, I don't start the sermon and say, hey, here's one verse or two verses, and then it's going to launch on faith, and then now I'm preaching 16 different passages on faith. That would be like a topical word study, which I think those sermons are still great, and I get I love all types of preaching. What I'd be most comfortable with is just pure expository preaching. But I didn't take over a church. Well, I didn't take over a church that was that way.
You're great at that.
Yeah, thank you. That's not maybe one day we'll go to that. But right now we do it on our midweek. We have a midweek service, so we do expository teaching, but it wouldn't be like MacArthur expository preaching. No, it would be a charismatic version of expository.
So gifted at that, though. But let's go through some of these things. Total depravity.
Yeah,
you still agree with that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Unconditional election.
Not so much. No.
Do you feel like you have like a great language for it, or it's just like it's both and to you? Like is it Arminian conditional election?
No, honestly, it's like what you said. I don't have. I would I genuinely get asked all the time. So what are you today? Then are you Calvinist or Arminianist? I'm neither. Or both and is what it would be. There are points of Arminianism, and Arminianism and Calvinism is deep. It's rich. It's not just. You have tulip, and then you have the Arminian contrary to tulip. But for me, it was, in the sense of what I would say is I believe that we are born into sin, totally depraved, and can only be regenerated by God, by the Holy Spirit. I believe that Christ was elected before the foundation of the earth. Jesus was elected to die and save us of our sins. I believe in Romans that the Apostle Paul is trying to tell the church who's specifically, Jewish, because it's the theological constitution for the church, Romans is he was showing Jewish believers and others that God didn't fall upon the decision of Jesus to save us of our sins. That has been elected and foreknew since before the foundation of the earth. Your salvation through Jesus has been foreknown. God is not in time making pivots like a coach on a football team. God is completely aware of the plays that he's made when it comes to Jesus. I believe that you take irresistible grace. I think that God's grace is resistible by the human will, that a person can, when God is knocking, they can reject.
The saints?
I believe persevere. Once you're saved, you're always saved.
So it is interesting because you kind of are both in.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably like that too, which I'm sure if I talk to the right person in either camp, they would destroy me in the argument.
Exactly,
and
for sure.
That's why it's not that fun of a conversation.
So someone much smarter than us would be able to say, you can't believe one without the other, and here's why. They all continge upon each other. I don't agree with that, but when you meet someone smarter than you, it doesn't matter, I don't
think we're helping people right now. That's the problem with this podcast.
We're probably giving people some breathing room to say, oh, wait, I don't have to have it all figured out.
I hope so. I also think that people think that we might be, is causing confusion because of the lack of clarity. But to me,
you stay in church long enough, you're going to get confused on a lot of things.
I just feel like there's such tension in all of it, and I start going through those. It's like I think that Christ did die for the whole world, but a gift can be sitting there, and if you don't receive it, then you don't receive it. So
and I think once you give your life to Christ and God creates the mystery of the miracle of regenerating your heart from a heart of stone to a heart of flesh, that it can't be reversed.
Well, hey everyone, this is Rich Wilkerson Jr. from VU Church in Miami, Florida, and I want to take a moment. If you are a pastor out there, I want to invite you to our Pastors Assembly. It's happening January 26th and 27th, 2026. That's a Monday and a Tuesday. This is our third annual Pastors Assembly. This really is a gathering of like-minded men and women who feel called and are shepherding the church, leading, feeding, protecting God's sheep. I think we are a fraternity, a sorority of brothers and sisters who understand the shared suffering and also the shared joy of what it means to lead in God's house. And I think one of the most dangerous things you can do is try to do that alone. That's why we started the Pastors Assembly. It really is a space for two things: to train you, that you would grow, that you would get better, but also to impart something to you. Here at VU Church, we don't think we're the hero of the story. We definitely don't think we're the expert of the story, but hopefully we can guide you a little bit and come around you to help you know you're not alone. Together, we get better. Monday and Tuesday, January 26th. It's a Monday night, and then it's Tuesday. It's finished by early afternoon. We're going to have great guests in. Of course, my wife and I, we will be leading the charge along with the VU team. Come, be with us. You might find a friend in the fight. Also, this year, I'm really excited to announce that we are hosting for the first time ever on Monday morning, the very first ever, VU Pastors Assembly Golf Tournament. Come on, can you think of anything better? Miami, January, golf, Jesus, pastors, the church. Doesn't get better than this. Get signed up today, pastorsassembly.com. I'll see you there.
Something you and I were talking about the other day when someone says, but I know someone who gave up their salvation. Well, it'd be one of two things. My answer would be they never gave their life to Christ truly. They joined
which is a reformed
culture.
Answer.
Yeah.
Usually.
Or it would also be, give them time. That I was a person who was regenerated, but in the club, and in a strip club, I was in my 20s in that. And I fully know that I was redeemed by God, and the Holy Spirit convicted me, and I wept and I repented, and I confessed. And so if you had met me from, the 9 months of 2011, or 2010 to 2011, you would have been like, there's no way this guy's saved.
Even though you had already heard the gospel, received the gospel.
Yeah. I'd received the Lord in 2007.
Yep.
But I was in a strip club, but I knew, but here I am, 15 years later, not struggling with those same things, and I have victory, but if someone met me,
clarify.
But if someone met me then, someone could have said, well, he's not saved. There's no way.
Well, I have always loved that story in Mark chapter 2, where they're lowering that paralytic man down and because of their faith, your sins are forgiven. And then the Pharisees chatting, how can he can't forgive sins? And of course, they are completely irritated that he's forgiving sins. But they also have a challenge here because they have a theology that doesn't line up with the experience. And the theology is you're on your back, paralyzed because of sin.
Yeah.
You can't be on your back and be declared forgiven.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea that like, well, I don't think you can forgive sins, but even if you could, he would be walking, but he's not walking yet, which we know in the next moment, he's like, what do you think is harder, to forgive, get up and walk? Yeah. However, there was a time lapse there of some sort of portion where he was still on his back. How long is someone staying on their back okay to you, believing that they could be forgiven and that salvation could have already transpired in their heart? It just might take some time before they actually get up and walk, or before they walk completely in God's will all the way. I think there's something really powerful about that. It's a beautiful picture. And I 100%.
And God talks, Paul talks about it in Romans, where he talks about the forgiveness of Christ through his blood over our sins. And he talks about grace availeth much over our sins, that even when you sin, God's grace covers it. And then Paul leads into the moment, I think it's Romans 5 or 6 or something like that. And he says, so when you sin as a believer and Christ has died for it, does it mean that we take advantage of it and that we can go and do whatever we want? And he uses a very Greek explicit cuss word. He basically says F no, in the Greek. And he says F no. When you fully understand God's grace, you do not take advantage of God's grace, and so there's a difference between knowingly, consciously taking advantage of the work of the cross to succumbing to your sin and then acknowledging it, whether it's in the process of a day or months or years. But there is a difference between going, oh, I know I'm taking advantage of God right now and his grace, to the point of just saying, no, I am a sinner and I am in a season where I am fighting my flesh every day and I keep failing regularly.
I just took a few weeks for preaching on the book of Jude, parts of Jude, I should say. Didn't get through that whole chapter. It's like one chapter. You couldn't do that, Rich. But just where he says, let's contend for the faith. I'm saying many have slipped in among you, and they're treating, grace as a license for, immorality. And grace is not a license for that. I firmly believe that. I think that if you've actually been set free and been given a license, the license is to drive. It's not to crash.
Yeah.
It's a pretty simple way, right? Like, I crash. It's okay. I've got a driver's license. Yeah, Remember that scene in Dumb and Dumber where he's like, it's okay. I'm a limo driver. He like goes off the jet bridge. That's what I always think when I read that passage. It's like, it's okay. I have a driver's license. Like, dude, you're still going to jail.
You know
what I mean? Like, we're going to arrest you, sir.
Yeah.
You've flipped over 3 cars here.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing with grace. It's like, just because you've been given grace doesn't mean you can just crash into things and not expect consequences.
Yeah.
And it doesn't give you permission to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
It gives you the strength and the power to actually live in freedom and to walk in it. But it's really, really beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
To talk about for a moment, you're back on your dad's staff. Because I want to get up to you actually taking on this church, but when did you get married? You got married as a minister? That's what I was realizing.
Yes,
I didn't realize that you were already in ministry, which is kind of a unique thing.
Yeah.
We were talking about your wife earlier. Like, you have a really cool wife. She was a professional athlete.
Yeah.
Share about meeting her and how you guys got together and where you were at in ministry at that time.
So at the time that I had met her, I was a youth pastor and I had youth ministry. And probably the same year I met her was the same year that you came through, and we met. And so I would have either.
So you were a single man when I came and preached for you back then?
Yeah.
Dude, I've been married my whole life.
I was doing the math the other day because recently you said whatever. You got married at 21, 22?
Got married at 16. We had our parents sign for it. They
did a child marriage.
I was bride of Christ, and then at 17 met Don Cherie, and then. It's wild to me that I was out there preaching for you as an old tired evangelist, and you were a single man of God getting ready to take over this monstrosity mega church.
Yeah.
Man, this thing's
massive. At that time, I definitely wasn't going to be taken over because I was the guy. I got 2 older brothers, so it was they were shoo-ins to take over the ministry or someone on staff. Me and none of my brothers wanted to take over the church. We saw how much my dad sacrificed. we saw how much he wasn't around growing up. You know, there was times in my life, me and my dad have such a great relationship now, and we've had so many great conversations. But as a young, my dad's a workaholic. He's Mexican. So he's, you know, it's either 12 jobs or one job 12 times, you know? And so he's like, that's him, you know, he's got a work ethic like none other.
I was just there preaching at the conference, and him and I talked for a little while.
Yeah.
He said, well, I'm not going to be in there tonight, son. I said, why not? And he said, I'm preaching to the kids ministry.
Yeah.
I was like,
Dude's
man,
not done.
but I was inspired by it.
He doesn't stop.
He inspires
He's
me.
a chaplain for the sheriffs. He preaches still all over.
He's a good man.
He's
You
64.
got a good dad.
Yeah. Thank you. He's
So
great.
you're doing Milk and Honey conference, and you're dating this girl, and I'm coming in to preach.
I just started talking to her.
Okay.
Probably at the same time. And so we just started coming, because that would happen in like a June or something. And then I had just met her, and her parents were leaders in our church, and her mom introduced us. And I thought, man, this girl is beautiful. I'm gonna try to ask her out. And so we end up going out. We end up dating for 12 months. And so when I was all in college, I was dating a girl for 4 years, and we were going to get engaged, put a deposit on a ring and everything. And we went to different schools. She ended up finding a new guy, and my middle brother found out by running into her with her boyfriend at Disneyland, holding hands and kissing. This was my fiance. And she eventually said, I didn't know how to tell you, I don't want to be married to a pastor. I finally decided, like, I don't want that life. I don't want to live up to people's expectations and all that kind of stuff. And she said, I know one day you'll be at your dad's church. It's too big. I don't want to be. At that time, I wasn't, you know. She's like, I know you will be one day. And so we had broken up. And so a couple years later now, I meet my wife, and we start dating for a year. And we're at dinner, and she says, I said, hey, you know, I think it's getting serious. It's a year in. I'd like to start talking about what marriage would look like. And she just said, I'm just still really deciding if I want to be married to a pastor. I know what that life, boom, all those emotions hit from my previous relationship.
Yeah.
And I'm not an emotional guy. I always joke that I've cried like 3 times in 10 years, you know, and this was over 10 years ago. That would have been one of 5 times I've cried before, you know.
We got to get you crying.
And
more,
so
man.
I would
Hang
love
out with
to,
me.
man.
I
If
cry
you can
3 times a week.
If you can figure it out, let me know.
Yeah,
I've done it.
bro.
I've tried it all.
Come here. Let me hold you.
Yeah. Can I sit on your lap later on and you just console me, talk about some things?
I wail, bro.
I want to so bad.
We can talk about that off camera.
Yeah. Help me figure it out. I need a deliverance or something. Probably
Beautiful. So you teared up at dinner?
I go in the bathroom and I just like start.
Where were you guys at, the Red
bawling.
Lobster?
We were at Wood Ranch.
Oh, nice.
It's good. The bread, you know, the little parsley bread that they give you. So this was
you go in the
12,
bathroom,
11
you
years
start
ago.
crying.
Start going to the bathroom. I go cry. I come back. Our food gets set on the table. I look at the waiter. I said, could you please box this up? We didn't even, she's looking at me like, what just happened? And he boxes the food up. I pay for the bill. I drop her off at her house. We whole way 15 minutes to her house. We don't talk. I pull up to the house and I say, hey, when you leave this car for the next 30 days, I don't want to text. I don't want to talk. I don't want to call. You need to spend time with God, and I need to spend time with God, whether this relationship is right for us for 30 days. I said on day 31, all I want to hear is you want to move this relationship forward or you don't. Because I asked her, like, do you have an issue with my character? Is it my integrity? Is it that? She's like, no, it's just me. It's like, do I want a future with a past? I said, well, then that's a God problem. So that's between you and God, because there's nothing I have to address, and I'm not going to not be a pastor anymore. So this is God's call on my life. So that's something you have to reconcile with God. And so she leaves the car for the next 30 days. We don't talk. On day 14, I'm in Miami at VU conference. She texts me and says, I miss you. This is too hard. And I said, I'm not God. That was my only response. And then, you know, VU worship was going on. And so I'm in the middle of praise and worship. I'm like, this woman, what is she doing? That was my response. Probably back then thought that was a cooler response than I would think it was now, you know?
You're intense, man. I love this.
These
are all intense moves.
I live in conviction
I'm out
every
of
day
here,
of my
Dad.
life.
I'm going to Masters. I'm out of here, Masters. I'm going to Dad. I'm not God.
I live my conviction, man.
I like it.
As
I
best
like
as
it.
possible, you know?
So you write her that back.
Yeah, and then I come back, and day 31, she says, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I love you. This was the 30 days of hell. I cannot see my life without you. And ever since then, we've recommended for anyone seriously dating to take 30 days away from each other to decide, is it lust or love, you know? And that's been kind of one of our marriage things that we recommend to people all the time, because when you're married, there's going to be days that you have to choose to want to talk to your spouse. It's the opposite, you know, like been married now 10 years.
You can't take 30 days off in a marriage.
Exactly. So when you're 30 days off silent, when you love each other most, you know, theoretically, right? Then when you are married, there's going to be full weeks that you go, I don't want to talk to her. Or she's thinking, I cannot stand, I do not want to talk to him. If we've already exercised self-discipline in the time that we loved each other most, you know, expressingly when you're dating the honeymoon phase. Well, now in this phase, there's many days I just go, Adam, go talk to your wife. Shut up. You did 30 days without her. You can do 1 minute while doing the opposite and go and love your wife. And so that's been something really important to us. Well, within like 60 days, we get engaged and we get married, and we get married in 2015. So 2 weeks ago, we celebrated 10 years of marriage. And
what's your date?
Our date is October 16th.
There you go.
Yeah.
We started VU like September 16th or something like that. So it's like a month
of that same year.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2015. Yeah. Because I totally remember that, because it was when VuCon had happened back then. It was still, it was Rendezvous, and it was the young adult ministry, you know, for Trinity, you know.
You would have been engaged.
I would have been in the process. Yeah, I would have been 60 days away from getting engaged. Yeah.
You do understand a little bit probably now, 10 years into this thing, right? Like, I think that is probably a pretty big mountain to climb as an outsider marrying a pastor. Like, that wasn't me.
Oh, yeah.
Me and DC were kids.
Yeah.
And we would say this, I'm going to be a pastor, but I wasn't a pastor when she married me, and we didn't even know what that looked like. Whereas Ashley's in this church,
she grew up in.
There's all this hardware around. I keep saying this just because when I went there, I'm like, this place is the biggest place I've ever been to. But it's funny because I think these objects and these symbols and these actual like materials represent so much in our eye. Like, this is a big weight to carry. And now she's like entering into that. That would be a big hurdle that has nothing really to do with you. But for you, you're like, this is all I know. And this is what I'm called to. Like, it's not that big of a deal, but you've gotten strong carrying it or growing up in it.
Yeah. And we're at the mall, and they're like, oh, it's Diego's son. It's very normal for me. And my wife's thinking, I will have no identity. If I marry this guy, I have no, it is. Fully growing and maturing, it's like she waited for sure with the amount of weight that she should have. Even though to me, it seemed very like, do you love me or not? Let's go, Other people choose people.
I don't believe in nepotism, but I do believe in like being realistic. And there is something, if there is the son of a pastor or a daughter of a pastor who's grown up in that front row seat carrying that weight as a family, if they have a call and an inclination and a leaning, I think that they shouldn't be deprived or held back for the opportunity merely because it could come off as nepotism. It's more like, this is pretty realistic, that they have a grace and an experience that far is so different from a common person that could be very, very helpful in terms of,
for sure, in
terms of transitioning or stepping something into this. But I do just think, 10 years into marriage, it's like, yeah, bro, that was a big
huge step for her,
Ashley, to swallow.
Yeah. And I'm incredibly thankful because I didn't, I was engaged to someone else at one point, and the way my wife has championed me, and she always says, she told me at the time when we were processing how big of a deal it was, because she said, because I know you're going to pastor this church one day. And for me, I got 2 older brothers. I have tattoos all over. I'm intense. Like, I'm somewhat odd to be around, like I'm not, anyone who hangs out around me, I'm not like a normal person in the sense of like, I don't watch sports. I don't get, like I read, I watch, I listen to things, listen to like half of all your podcasts. It's all I do. It's like I'm listening. So I'm kind of like I'm an odd person to be around. So at that time, to say that I was going to lead the church, and I had a marketing company that was immensely successful. I had my own business. It was like, there's no way I'm going to lead this black church that has a wooden podium. We wear choir robes on Sundays. My dad wears a 3-piece suit to preach in. Like we throw handkerchiefs at the front altar, like when women come in dresses, we give them blankets for their, like this is the church that exists. That there's no way this guy is going to lead that. Ashley, do not understand. That's not going to happen. And she's like, you don't understand what I see in you. It will happen. And this was 5 years before me and my dad ever had a conversation of taking over the church. And I'm like, babe, my middle brother, there's only 2 preachers in Master Seminary history that got 100% in preaching. It was my brother Caleb and Francis Chan. So I'm like,
my goodness.
I'm like, Caleb's going to take over
Bro,
the
that
church.
was a flex right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Bro.
I'm like, me?
That's a subculture flex right there.
Yeah, that's if you know, you know.
If you
Only
know,
2
you
guys in
know.
all of Master Sem got 100%
Golly.
in preaching.
I covet that.
So I'm like,
I want that.
yeah, exactly.
I want that accolade. I want
need
that so bad. I don't
they give
believe
a
in
medal
envy,
for
but
that?
It's coming over me right now.
And then there's
Francis Chan,
yeah.
your brother, they got 100?
Yeah, 100% in preaching. Oh, man. The only criticism my brother had at the time, the guy was like, you could comb your hair differently and present yourself a little better. And he's like, oh, you're just looking for something now. You know, it's like, but I still got to give you 100%.
Well, I know I could win with the hairdo.
The Leonardo, look, I mean, you got,
think my hair is
you're already
fine.
there.
My hair.
Yeah, it's good.
It's my actual,
The
content.
preaching ability. It's my stutter.
Yeah.
It's
Bro,
my
that's
losing my
crazy.
train of thought.
So
you
you guys get married. Tell us how you came to lead the church.
Yeah, so we got married in 2015, 2017. We've been married for almost 2 years. Really, it was I think it was the end of 2016. We'd been married for almost 2 years. My dad had come to me and he said, Adam, in order for this church to survive, because we started hitting our 25-year mark, and if anyone who knows church culture, there's this thing called 25-year hump. And what you consciously do over the next 5 years will determine when you hit 25 years into your 30th year. It'll determine whether your church is going to survive for a new generation or won't.
I don't know about this.
Oh, you've never heard that before?
No, tell me about it.
Yeah, so it's basically, you know how you have like, in marriage, you have the 7-year hump.
Okay.
Hey, if you can make
of
it
that.
past 50% of all divorces happen in the first 7 years of a marriage.
Now, is that based off of Joseph's dream that 7 fat cows would come out?
Yeah, so what
and
happens is in the Hebrew.
Okay, sorry. Sorry.
And so it's kind of a comment. So marriage, you have the 7-year hump. In church, kind of in church lifelines, it's known as the 25-year hump.
Okay.
And it's that thing that like once you hit 25 years, the generation who planted the church is now either aging out, moving, dying, whatever it is. That generation is going, and a new generation has to be reached. If it's not, then you just end up being, and we know it, and we've seen it before, is you have a sanctuary that seats 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 with 500 people, 600 people, and they're all in their 60s and 70s, and so that's very common with like, the space I came out of, with a lot of black churches, like the Kojic church, right? A lot of the Kojic churches had big heydays, and then the guy transitioning holds on to it till his 80s, and so the church just ages and disseminates. And then they give it to a new guy, and then he has to like basically rebuild an entire new church. And so what happened was my dad started really consciously, because he's a big leadership guy. He's like, we're going to hit the 25-year. What is my plan? Like, what am I going to do? And so it was in his mind. It was nothing he was talking about with anyone. And what happened is me and Ashley in 2016, we had went to one of Chad Veach's services. And Chad used to speak at Milk and Honey a lot too. So for me, it was really like you and Chad were my favorites in terms of like coming into our youth and sharing. And so we go to one of Chad's services. And I know you know this, but like with what you have done with Vu and what Chad has done with Zoe and a few others, like you brought the next gen excitement. You guys brought excitement into the church again, like an anticipation of culture and energy with just the way that the Sundays looked, right? There's big greeting culture. You guys really fundamentally brought in this view of like, and I know other people were part of it too, but like holding signs, greeting people with love, coffee, to me, bringing the communal approach back into church and that joy that's kind of in the setup for now to worship God. And so we go into one of his services on a Sunday night. I had finished going to church, and Ashley looks at me and she's like, you and I need to do something like this at our church. And I was like, with just that excitement and youthfulness and energy. And I told her, like, you want to plan your own church? What are you talking about? She's like, no, remember how your dad's always been talking about he wants a Sunday night service? I think you and I should do it. Now, anyone that knows Ashley, she doesn't like the stage. She doesn't like being in front. So to hear that from her, and she was also not anti, but like scared of that day when I took over the church and stuff like that, even though I had never believed it. I agreed, and we started something called Fresh Start on Sunday nights. And in the course of 12 months, it just blew up. It blew up into thousands and all that stuff. And me and Ashley were leading a team, and now we're in our late 20s. And my dad approached me and he said, "Hey, my board has asked me if something happens to me, I need someone that can step in whether I'm in a coma or whatever. Would you do it? If someone ever needs to step into the driver's seat, would you step into it?" And I went, "Now that's odd. No, And he's like, "No, hear me out." And he said, I remember my word for word exact statement back to my dad was, "I don't see it in me, but if you do, you're my pastor." So I say yes. I submit to my pastor. And he said, "Okay." My dad's a fast runner and gunner. So within 3 months, he's like, "You know what? That whole thing I talked about, we're not gonna do. Let's start a transition plan together." So it's like he moved it really fast. And he, that same time with Fresh Start, both of my older brothers sat me down. We were hanging out one night and they said, "Adam, we want you to know when Dad asks you to take the church, we're fully on board.
Wow.
We'll serve you." Got one brother 5 years older, one brother 2 years older. And I said, "Guys, Dad's not going to ask me to take over the church. Like, I don't look like the church. I'm completely opposite." And what I came to find out later on in my own ed, however, actually, I may not look like the church that was there then, but I look like their kids. A lot of their kids who have fallen away from God or questioned or whatever. It's like my story, matches with them, and that's what God was establishing, not for my dad's generation, but our generation. And in 2017, my dad said, "Let's start a 10-year transition plan. You're 27, you'll be 37 when you take over the church. And then that'll be the transition plan." I said, "Yeah, whatever you want to do. I'm on board. I'm submitted to it." And in 3 years later, we celebrated 25 years as a church. And my dad announced to the church that we would start a succession. And he said, "Oh, it's far from now. It's probably going to be in like 7 years." And then we went through COVID. And my dad was like, "I don't have the energy to do this." Because the Black church was hit the most in COVID in terms of coming back to church. There's a lot of churches that are Black that still haven't even seen close to what their pre-COVID numbers. A lot of the Black community hasn't gone back to church like other ethnicities. And so my dad, when we reopened church, we went from, 8,000 on a weekend to we reopened with 700. So it was like, he was like, "I'm a new church planner again.
Yeah, this is a journey.
I don't." So he said, "Let's do it together." So he and I did it together for the first 2 years. And then there's a couple things he says, but in 2022, he looked over his shoulder on a Sunday and I was in the courtyard and he was in the courtyard and my prayer line was longer than his. And he had felt like the Holy Spirit said, my grace is moving from you to your son. Whenever you're ready, he'll be ready. And my dad talked to me and said, "Hey, let's do it next year. Wow. Let's ramp up by 5 years, or 5 or 6 or 4 or 5 years. Let's ramp up the transition." And so we announced to the church that within a year that we would start it. So now me and Ashley have been in the role for 2 years. So for us, it happened really fast. Some people hear, it ended up becoming a 7-year transition, but I was 27 years old. So right. There were different elements to it and stuff like that. But, to us, it had felt like it was really fast because now I'm 35. I took over. By time I took over, the church was probably at like 4,000 or 5,000 weekend attendance, and so I took that over at 33. With 2 campuses. Now we're just about to be at 5 campuses with back to over at 8,500 average attendance on a weekend, and so we've almost doubled in the past 36 months from not just our leadership taking over. My dad is still involved and he's an incredible leader. We are a great team. My dad's on the team, so we rock together. And then our team in general are phenomenal leaders as well. And they're diverse themselves in their leadership styles. So, and now we're going on to our 5th campus and just God's continuing to move.
What would you say to people out there that are kind of listening right now when it comes to just this concept of transition? Yeah. Not just transitioning churches, but I mean, life is full of transitions. Life is full of twists and turns and adjustments. And I think that maturity is always kind of revealed in the transition. Maybe encourage from that concept, things that you've learned.
Well, there were a couple things, you say my dad being my predecessor, a lot of the maturity weight is on him. It was fully my job to honor him and respect where he's at. For him, he had to deal with all of it. He had to deal with his ego in the transition, of like, I'm losing influence, he's gaining influence. He had to deal with letting go, control. He had to deal with not being the senior pastor. So there was a lot he had to do. And so the pressure and the weight was on him. It was it frustrating for me at times? Yeah, sure. But at the end of the day, I was incredibly blessed that not even just as my dad, but the man who started that church chose me to lead something that God gave him. We're not a denomination. We're not this 100-year-old church that's had 60 pastors, whatever, it's not like, we had to find someone. It was, my dad could have gone another decade.
Yeah.
He was 63 or 62 when he transitioned it. He could have easily gone into his 70s. But there were a couple of things for him that to me, I think stand out for anyone that processes transition. He went into it with a mentality of, I want to transition a sailing ship, not a sinking ship. A lot of people are fine transitioning things when they're sinking because now, hey, like it's on the new guy. I'm good. Like I pastored it or led this company in its prime. It's up to the new guy to carry his weight and build this back up. Well, it's hard to cover holes of a sinking ship when it's out in the water. So, giving a new guy keys when this thing is tanking, it's hard. Like you're giving them almost an impossible job. So for my dad, he and I worked really hard together to create health in the church as much as possible. The moment we felt like the church was healthy enough, that's when the transition happened. It's, hey, there's momentum going up. Let's do the transition now because it's healthy. Some of the other processes that he had was, this is what he would say if you were talking to him. He talked to a lot of guys that had transitioned before, and he had asked them, what do you do when you know the guy you're going to pass it to is more gifted than you are? Because I feel like I'm holding my son back. And a lot of guys said, anyone I ever transitioned it to, I never thought they were more gifted than me. I thought I was more gifted. And my dad was like, well, that's not my case. I found someone that I believed had something more special in areas than even I had. And so he was waiting almost like he says, is like a bull to like, he wanted to release that into the church within a leadership spectrum. And so we did for a little bit, and we could do it because of his maturity, is we began to make decisions together, and then there was a time where he was the final authority. And then there was just between one day, we decided going into a new year, hey, Adam, you're now my authority. But nothing was really at the time announced to the staff. It was internally in our executive team. And so it went from me looking at my dad for final decision. He started looking at me for final decision, and we were still both in the same room. And so we did that because he's still around today, and we wanted that to be healthy and that still to happen. And then one of the other things is we sat down and he said, what are all the changes you would make when you take over? And I shared it, and he said, I'm going to do as much of this when I'm in charge, so that when you take over, it's not on you. And so then he kind of had my wish list, and he said,
a pretty
I'm
amazing dad.
Yeah. And so
pretty great leader.
Yeah. And then the final day was, he sat with me and he said, when you take over, I still want to be on staff here if you'll have me. Would you do me a favor? In 30 years, I've never had a job description. Would you write my job description of what my next 20 will look like if you'll have me here at the church? And so I spent a week and I prayed and I thought about it, and I made my dad a JD with hours and days and everything. And he looked at it and he said, thank you for believing in me. I love this. I want to do this. Let's transition. And that was the final decision that he said. And that's what started. He said, I want to do this right now. I said, okay, if that's what you want to do. So yeah. So those were kind of some of the conversations we had. And there were moments of like my insecurity, his insecurity. There was stuff we had to clarify. And there were days that I felt like I was in charge and not in charge leading up to the transition. But on the back end, the moment I took lead of the church, my dad goes on stage every time and says, I want to thank my pastor for letting me preach today. My pastor shared such a good word yesterday. This week I called my pastor for advice. This is the advice he gave me. Like my dad has I honestly, for him, because he's such a dominant, he's a D on the personality type. I thought there's no way he'll be able to be a number 2 guy. It'll be impossible for him to do. And he's been the best number 2 guy I think any guy could ever have.
It sounds like it.
Yeah,
man.
He's been really. This to me, I think, for just outside looking, it's been one of the best seasons he's ever been in. Because he's thriving. He's still shepherding our church in many ways, and we have a great relationship. And so, and people know in our church, they do not get confused. Well, who's really the pastor here? Like they know I'm the pastor, and they know that Pastor Diego's still grandpa, and he comes through and pours into us.
Well, I think it's to your benefit, and wisdom would say it's the greatest asset you have to have the person who started this.
Yeah.
This guy who dug this out of nothing,
Yeah.
who's been there, who's been faithful, and now he's still desiring to participate. You got to be a complete idiot not to try to figure out a way to make that work.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I think it just creates a healthier church. We started a church 10 years ago, but man, we need more fathers and grandfathers in the VU community, and they're showing up and they'll come, but it creates strength. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yeah.
And I think that your dad, I don't know him well, just met him recently, but so wise and so gracious and so humble. And that probably is who he has always been, hence why you guys have been able to build what you've built. Talk for a moment about Patria, what you're excited about, what that name means, and why you've chosen that as the name of the church.
Yeah, we were, so, one of the things, there's a few reasons, but one of the things, we were Abundant Living Family Church in the 90s. You'd pick a name that was long and, had all these different things that explained what your church is about and believe. But over those 30 years, people would call it one call it differently. Some people call it Abundant. Some people call it ALFC. We were most known for ALFC, the acronym. But some people, you would ask them, what does it mean? And they'd say Abundant Life Family Church. We would have guest speakers. They'd always get the name wrong. And they would feel bad, even though they know us very well. But it would just be hard to remember. And so me and my dad, we would talk all the time and Dad, did you ever think about changing it, simplifying? It just wasn't that big of a deal. No, but so then really as I started to, the last year of our transition, I really started praying, hey, if we're going to go into a new season at the church, would it be the right time to change our name? And we had started working with this a company to help with Google SEO, search engine optimization. And I had asked them one day in a meeting, I said, hey, as you guys have been doing search engine optimization for our church, how much of a headache has been our name? Is it none, some? And they were like, man, everyone types in something different when they're looking for your church. And it just doesn't help people find your church, because there's a church that's called Abundant Church in Texas, the Niemans, who are my friends, and someone will be in our area and type it and they're brought to Texas, and this and that. And so, there's a lot of life churches. And so your Abundant Living, some people call it Abundant Life, and it brings them to a life church or whatever. And so they were just like, the name is so long that it is giving people a tough time when they're looking for your church. We can see that. And that really wasn't the reason that we thought to change our name, but it did for me go, well, as our people are sharing their faith with people in the gospel and then inviting them to their local church, Scripture makes it clear. I'm still, at the end of the day, I've become a charismatic and a Pentecostal at heart, even to the point that I'm on the board for that university that asked me to leave. So I'm on the board for Life Pacific now. And so, I'm a word of faith guy in a lot of ways. So I'm write the vision, make it plain. It's not plain. The vision's written, but it definitely ain't plain. And so we should probably do that, because then the Scripture says, so that they may run. And right now, some people aren't able to run because it's just not clear. The name is too long and too clear in some ways. And so I really started thinking and praying, and hey, being a Bible student, it was, hey, let's look up family. And what was interesting as I was studying the Greek word family, over 200 times when the word family is used in the New Testament, the word oikos is used, which is household. It's like a gender neutral type of thing. It's mom and dad in the house. Only 3 times in Scripture does the word patria comes, which is still in English translated family, but it's a family that receives a father because it comes from patriarch. And so it's only in Luke, Acts, and Ephesians. Patria is used in Luke when Joseph adopts Jesus and gives him his patriarchal status, which we knew was needed in order for Jesus, because Joseph was tied to King David, and the Messiah had to be both priest and king. And so we needed Joseph to adopt. The reason why, in the birth story of Jesus, the adoption of Joseph and no one else could have adopted Jesus is because Jesus needed to be part of the Davidic line.
Yep.
Through his mom, he was part of the priestly line. And so that word patria was used because Joseph gave Jesus the Davidic line. And then in the book of Acts, it's the terminology that as we become believers, we're engrafted into the Abrahamic lineage. So Abraham becomes our father even as Gentiles, right? And then in Ephesians, it's when we confess and believe that Jesus is Lord, he adopts us. The Father adopts us. So to me, it was just like, as I was studying this for just a Bible student and, all that, it was just like, oh, this is family. Like patria, like family, that is us. We're a family church. The gospel is in the name, because our now verse is from Ephesians 3:20. And so it's like, this is who we are. In order to explain our church's name, you got to share the gospel. When someone says, what does patria mean? Well, it's not just family. Oikos is family. Anyone can have a household, but patria specifically is one that's adopted into the family of God through Jesus. So it was like, when we launched it with our church, at first, obviously a lot of people weren't fans of it because it's just, people don't like change, but it caught on really quick, and the gospel's in the name. And then I immediately went online and I'm like, has a church ever been named Patria? Because I do believe our church is called to a national influence. And so one of the questions I had is, well, like Abundant and Life and all that, how many churches are called Patria? And there wasn't one in America that was called Patria. And so it felt confirmed. So then about a week later, I go sit with my dad, kind of start giving him the soft talk, like, hey, I love our church name, I'm trying to honor him. And he cuts me off. He's like, Adam, let me just ask you something. Are you asking me if you could change the church's name? And I was like, well, in some ways, yes. He said, I'm going to stop you right there. First of all, I don't care. A name's a name. Like that doesn't mean anything to me. What I care about is the vision. What do we do for the gospel? What do we do for people? It's the vision. Like that is what I care about. He goes, second of all, God already told me this morning, I was going to come to you and ask you to pray about changing the church's name. And I was like, what? He said, I was reading Exodus this morning, and he said, when God went to Moses, he said, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I came as the creator. And he goes, but to you, I come as Yahweh, I am. And so he said he was showing Moses that for one generation, I've approached who I am as the creator, but to you, I'm going to approach as I am, Yahweh, the very breath in your lungs. I am that I am. And so he said, same God, but fresh wind, fresh approach. And he said, God told me that when you take over the church, God's going to bring a fresh wind. A new name is essential in order for that to happen, because it will show God with the simplicity of who we're supposed to be as a church. So he said, so tell me, what is it? And I had told him, and he was like, I don't get it, but I will. He was very honest. He's like,
I like that. I don't get it.
But I will.
We're going to be called Truth, Dad.
Yeah. He wasn't like, man, I love that. That's so creative, son. You're so he was literally like, how do you pronounce it? I'd tell him. And then for the first month
like,
that he was on
it's
stage.
Zillow.
Yeah.
Zillow.
And then
Zillow.
Like,
no, Yelp. It's Yelp Church.
We're doing that, that way. Yeah. It's 5-star. It's 5-star church.
It's the Facebook.
It's 5 stars, so that when people go on Yelp and they leave us 1 star, they have to say still 5 stars.
Yes, they still have to. So dope.
5-star church.
Bro, what's cool about that Patria verse too, like from the gospel to Acts to Ephesians, it's all adoption.
Yeah,
Joseph
exactly.
had to adopt. We're not sons of Abraham without the adoption to Ephesians. It's really, really cool. Like these little
for sure
cross references, grace involved in all of them. I mean, I've often preached about Joseph, like, why was Joseph picked? Well, because he was a gracious man. Yeah. And this is the son who is known of grace and truth. Like
Yeah.
Joseph could have divorced. He was going to divorce her. Even he was going to divorce her quietly. That was gracious.
Yeah.
Could have had her stoned. Was just going to divorce her quietly. He already had the DNA and the spirit of a gracious man, and then he adopts the son. And I think that stuff gets me excited. Man.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's why some people I start geeking out over our name, and then they're just like, "Cool, so it's Patria Church? You're a Republican church?" I'm like, I didn't say that.
Patriot Church is so good. Crusaders.
Yeah,
it's Crusader Church.
Yeah,
like, what do you mean? Like the Crusades? Yeah, that's what we're doing. But like in the heavenlies,
we're gonna just storm areas.
It's called Holy War Church.
You ever heard of it?
Yeah, it's like what? No, it is a holy war.
Yeah, I didn't expect that. We still would have went with the name, but because of the way that our mind is trained, most people hear patriot first.
No, that is, I right away when I first started, I was thinking Mel Gibson. Did you ever see that?
Yeah. You're like, oh, super American church.
Let's come up with some other church names. Shield of Faith Church.
Well, I've heard people say, I didn't see that in you. And I'd say, I didn't see what? I just didn't see that you'd plant a church that was super patriotic. And I'd be like,
bro, it's not that.
No. And then 90% of the time I'm wearing a hat or a shirt that has our church name on it. So then I point to it. I'm like, no, it's Patria. It's Patria.
Patriot Church is so good.
But oddly enough, in Spanish, Patria, same word, means homeland. And so a lot of people thought we were going towards the Hispanic, like, how is homeland connected to the Bible? Oh, like heaven's our home. And I'm like, oh, no, I wasn't even thinking about Spanish. That's not.
But I would just take all the meanings.
I say, yeah.
We named our church VU, which was a terrible name for a church. And everyone's like, oh, that church is obsessed with themselves. It means you. It's like, no, it was short for rendezvous. It has no meaning.
It's none. It just was brand awareness that people knew already. And you're like, let's run.
The people that were actually there. It's like,
yeah.
That's so funny.
I was going to ask you, what's the pitch when someone says VUS or like, and then they say, well, what does that mean?
Well, a lot of people call it Voss.
Oh, water.
The water, you know. Genuinely, the real story of was that we had a young adult ministry called Rendezvous.
Yep.
That was at that time, 2007, the meeting place. That just felt like a very universal name to do a Tuesday night gathering. I'm going to the Rendezvous. And it was too long to always say. People didn't know how to spell it, rendezvous. And we would just start going, I'm going to VU on Tuesdays. What up? It's VU Day. That's what we used to say Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Happy VU Day, everybody.
Yeah.
So things kind of take on like nicknames and meaning. And by the time we got ready to start the church, we had thought about some other names, Grace Church, whatever, Gospel First Church. But nothing felt real. Like, I don't know how it was naming your kids. My kids' names have meanings, but most of them were feelings for us. Bro, we feel this name. And when it came time to start, nothing felt more natural or normal than just to say it's VU Church. It's not Rendezvous Church. That was a mouthful, and the joke always is like, if you Google the word rendezvous, like it pretty much is strip clubs that come up. It's bizarre websites. This is not going to work. And rendezvous's got kind of a negative connotation at times, right? It can be kind of very like,
rendezvous,
promiscuous or something. But VU made no sense. And so there was no meaning put onto it. It was just like, this is who we are. I don't know how to say it, but like, it's actually our name, and we don't have some beautiful definition. Since then, I think now today, all these people kind of create, in French, it means you, the church is you. So that's kind of cool, and I don't mind people making those things. I think we've used it for videos and stuff.
Yeah.
But to me, it was just our name.
Yeah.
And it wasn't brand awareness. It wasn't thought out that way. I've now later discovered that like 4-letter words are the most
they're the most memorable. And
none of that was put on the board. None of it was like, good, 4 letters, and no other church is named that. I don't know why anybody else would ever name their church that. It'd be the most bizarre thing ever. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But it made sense for our story, and our story had this name.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, for those that knew Rendezvous, which I did, and even VUCon, because that was happening before even the church, it did seem like a no-brainer. It was just like, oh, okay, it would have to be the church. It'd be almost odd if you had, I thought, at the time, if you had come up with a whole different name.
It makes me laugh because like the whole story of Hillsong Church, like that name, it doesn't make any sense either. It was like it was Hills Christian Life Center, and they're like, oh,
they were doing songs.
Even Hillsong, but that's a made up word. It's like, why are you called Hillsong? It's not an area.
Yeah.
And I never knew that till I was like, oh, there's no deep meaning. It's like, nah, just look good. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's crazy to me. Hillsong.
Yeah.
Voo.
Just we came up with it.
I don't
It's
know.
nice.
But
Yeah, now there's a whole which we're part of it, like a Greek movement, make your church's name Greek. And I think that's more probably because it's easier to find Instagram things available and websites and all that.
I think it's meaningful to do a Greek, Zoe. It's like a Greek word.
Yeah.
But you find out all this stuff these days about companies like Zillow and Yelp. These are all made up words that were on purpose made up words to be memorable and to be searchable and to create
you want to stand it out.
Which I went into that not having any of those kind of
I remember talking to Jared Neiman. He said, "Hey, Adam, when you take over the church," because they were Abundant Living Faith Center, we were Abundant Living Family Church. They changed their name to Abundant about 5 years ago. They dropped everything.
Yep, that's
cool.
Bought
all the domains, all the Instagram handles, everything like that. So we were talking one day, and he said, "Hey, are you ever going to change the church name?" I said, "I can't." He was like, "Why?" I go, "Because I would change it to Abundant Church."
Yeah,
and you took it. You took everything.
Yeah,
I can't change it to Life Church.
Yep.
Living Church, that's not going to happen.
No, there's not any Life Churches.
So it was, Like we would have been the only one anyone ever knew.
I'm coming for you, Craig Rochelle.
And I'm like, in Family Church, we just take us straight back to the 90s if we did that. You like that?
I think you go Familia. So I like Patria. Patria's awesome. I like that it's Spanish too. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, it wasn't purposeful. Now we have thousands of Catholics giving their life to Christ in our church.
Well, Voo is a French word, and it's crazy because we have a lot of Haitians that go to our church. So they speak Creole, so that. It
connects right away.
Yeah. It's God, man. It's God. This is why I'm a Calvinist, by the way, because I only
God ordained all of it.
God,
you ordained that outfit today. You didn't even make the choice.
I did.
You opened up the closet and the pants were right next to the shirt.
They don't believe that he's joshing with them. I think it's super cool what you guys are up to. We're big fans of your church. Believe that your best days are in front of you. What's an area right now that God's maturing you in?
Oh my goodness. You mean as a leader, we just
always kind of come to the close. We always ask people, how are you maturing? What's an area that you're immature? Call it mature me. What's an area that you have to mature in at?
Yeah,
are you 35?
35. Man. So there's a lot in that regard. In that case, there's a lot. To be honest, one of the things that me and my dad are very different, but one thing we have exactly the same is work ethic. If it was my choice, I'd work 80 hours a week, no stop. I enjoy working. It's what I love, I think about work, I get excited about it. And so what God's just maturing me and has been maturing me, he's given me an incredible wife to remind me and to check me is that I know that my family and my boys are my first ministry and my wife is my first ministry. And I do a really good job at investing in her and investing in us. But really, God's maturing me in consistently, and there's a lot of things I'm praying through on what that would look like. But making sure that I'm pastoring and pouring into my sons the same way that I am the church and people through our podcast and sermons and my team is that, I want my sons to be discipled in the love of Jesus and the love of God. And there's stuff we're praying through, like, do we homeschool our kids so that they could be around us more? And what would that mean though for their social? We're just praying through a lot, but for me, it's God maturing me to say, because truthfully, I come from the Hispanic culture. So there's a thing called machismo. I don't know if you know what that is, but machismo is that idea that the father, as long as there's food in the fridge and the bills are paid, he doesn't have to do anything else in the household, right? So he doesn't have to go to any family things. He can sit on the chair, rest however he wants because he took care of the family, and wife has to do everything else, right? It's big in the kind of our Latino culture, and it's easy to fall prey into the culture that you were kind of raised in. And my dad has a gracious spirit to him, but he was that way. It was like my mom pretty much raised us. He was at work, 90% of the time. And since we have a great relationship, laughing, talking about it, reconciling what that looked like as a child. But for me, it's just like, man, God's maturing me to say, like, Adam, you cannot get these days back. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. They need to be your focus. And so I'm just looking at great opportunities to love them, take them out of school, bring them with me places. So God's maturing me in that area of really taking fatherhood seriously. And I think if someone hung out with me, they'd be like, what are you talking about, Adam? You're a great father, but I'm hard on myself when it comes to it. It's very conscious for me. And so making sure I'm at their games, making sure I'm engaged with what they're interested in, just laying on my son, watching him play on his iPad, having conversation. Like I didn't have that growing up in that sense. So I'm making sure I do that. And then just within my leadership, God's maturing me in patience. Like I'm a fairly impatient leader. Like I want to move fast, and I'm like the Facebook adage, move fast, break things. It was like, I want to move, and I just reminding myself, like, I have a lifetime to do all of this. So like, slow down, dude. Like it doesn't all, Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't have to do this. It doesn't all have to be built tomorrow. Consistency and slow and steady is what wins the race. A lot of people get big fast, but they aren't consistent. They fall fast. Those that grow fast tend to underdevelop in other areas. And just even like looking at you and your influence, there's been a consistency. When we're talking, it's like 20 years of this, 25 years of this. It's like, that's consistency that not everyone sees. So you just see a podcast like Mature Me, you're like, oh, cool. He recently had started doing something amazing. And it's like, no, that it's been consistency that's created influence. So I'm consistently reminding myself, like, it's something that I always whisper myself is that people may change, but Adam, you don't. Don't change. Now I can grow in areas, but what I say when I don't change, like, don't change your heart, don't change your care. Don't let circumstance change your demeanor. Man, love well. When someone curses you, bless them. When someone blocks you, give them grace, whatever, so it's like, those are the things I'm maturing, because it's hard.
Yep.
And what you and we talked about it the other day, like the old Adam is like harsh, and the old Adam will intellectually put you into a grave. The old Adam is judgmental, cynical, critical. And I don't ever want that guy to show up. I know what fruit that produced from that guy. It produced what Jesus said, a whitewashed tomb. I was a Pharisee in every regard. I had secret sin that was, massive, but on the outside, as long as I, looked presentable, I was good, and so maturing for me is living my faith as a daily walk and being submitted to the Spirit, in everything that I do.
It's beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I'm celebrating you.
Thanks,
I think taking care of our kids and being engaged with them is the greatest gift. And those are our real disciples.
Yeah.
And that is where wisdom will be proven in our children. And so I commend you. I celebrate you. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having
Mature
me.
Me set.
It's nice to finally see it. Man, I listened to so many. Man, that staff teaching you did in August that you posted was so good.
Oh, I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, you posted like your post-VUCon or pre-VUCon, like staff meeting. It was circles or something like that.
Yes.
Man, that was such a good teaching. Dude. So it's good to see. I know that wasn't in this space, but just where you do it. I think it was somewhere with the team. But I mean,
Ray doesn't want to put any more of those out. He's against putting those out.
You don't want the staff teachings?
No,
I need them.
I'm making this up.
We need them, man. We need them.
They're all the best.
Yeah.
This is Adam Mesa, everybody. Go check out his church, Patria Church.
America.
I'm kidding. It's Patria Church. They're in the California area. Follow them on all the things and leave us some comments. Love getting to talk to local church pastors like Adam that are doing really a great job in their area. If you're ever in that area, go check them out and see what they're about. But we love you guys. There's a lot more coming right here on Mature Me. Leave us some comments. Share this. Like it. See you at Pastors Assembly. See you at VUCon. All the stuff. We'll see you soon.